I do the same two things in the beginning of every year. I first look at what I've done in the previous year, do a recap, and pick out my favorites. Because I make things on a weekly basis, I'm always thinking about what to do next. I don't get to pause and enjoy what I've done. And turns out, I did a lot of animated figures last year, and most of them ended up on my favorite lists too. Check out last week's video to see which ones were my favorites. The second thing I always do is, I force myself to do something I'm not comfortable with, so that it sets the tone for that year. I did this mini stage for my Vegito Blue figure. It doesn't look like much now, but this was my first time using styrofoam for the rocky terrain. It was more like a small scale test. And for those who have seen my earlier MCU videos, you know I went through a phase where I used styrofoam regularly and made a bunch of diorama displays with it. Then the following year, I did Quicksilver. I was still pretty nervous about doing human faces at that point, and that figure was such a disappointment. I just wanted to make him look more like Aaron Taylor Johnson, and it was like a switch got turned on. Ever since then, I felt so much more confident painting human faces, and you can totally tell from the videos after that. Tony Stark, Thanos, Black Widow, they all look very lifelike. And then in 2023, I started the year with Cersei, arguably one of the worst MCU figures ever released. I mostly only do repaints, and rarely do modifications as I don't like making permanent alterations, even though that shouldn't matter. But Cersei's outfit needed an upgrade, so I tried epoxy putty, and she turned out so nice. I haven't really used epoxy putty that often, but I used it on the integrated suit's forearms, Venom's teeth, the soles of the damned on Death Strange, and more recently, Kingpin's vest. And last year, I started the year with Spider-Punk, because I wanted to get better at doing stylized figures. I was still avoiding cel-shaded figures then. The only ones I've done up to that point were the Symbiotes and Spider-Man 2099. But after doing Spider-Punk, I spent like 2 months doing the entire X-Men 97 wave, and I also did the Batman animated figures as well. And now I feel like I've reached level 2 when it comes to cel shading. So what do I want to overcome this year? I want to be able to do the comic book style in a believable manner. This is like cel shading but dialed up to 11. There are these flat colors, some shading, and most importantly, black lines everywhere. And you know me, I don't enjoy using black paint or do black outlines. But as you can see, I did it. I started working on Ben Reilly here after I did Prowler Miles, and it took me almost 2 weeks to finish. The Scarlet Spider was my favorite Spider-Man from the 90s animated series. I loved the unique yet simplified look of his, so this was a must-get for me. But I gotta say, this figure looks more like his comic book counterpart than the cartoon one. As a 90s cartoon fan, this packaging confuses me. I feel like they should have released this figure under the Across the Spiderverse line. Let's deconstruct this figure. Somebody has been going to the gym. Look at that physique. I normally prefer a more natural looking body on Spider-Man figures, but I think it works really well here. I like that he's a little bit buffer than Peter Parker. It just makes sense to me considering that he's a clone of Peter's. I still remember his backstory from the animated series. Anyway, back to this figure. There isn't really much to say about it. Hasbro pretty much nailed all the details. That said, I want to transform this figure into the Across the Spider-Verse version. He's just too muscular to be the animated one, and the vest isn't cartoon accurate anyway. The other option is to make him more comic book-like, which works out perfectly since I now have quite a handful of Spider-Verse figures. The only issue is that in the movie, the eyes are shaped differently. Here he kinda got those Venom looking eyes, so I gotta do something about them. The biggest obstacle for me is that I haven't really done comic book styled figures like this before, especially with those black lines everywhere. but I can't run from this forever. I do want to know if I can do comic book characters justice, and Scarlet Spider is a perfect figure to try it on. So... Hello, this is Ken. I like making things. Whether it's repainting my figures or making diorama displays, I love making things look awesome. My goal is to elevate my figures so they can shine on my display. Join my DIY venture as I ask myself the same question every week. Can I make it? Before I start painting, I need to prep the figure. To make the painting process a bit more manageable, I'm going to remove his vest first. So let me heat up the arms so that I can remove them from the torso, and then slide the vest out. Okay, that isn't working for some reason. The arm just doesn't want to come apart. Okay, plan B. This may actually be more effective. I see that there's already a seam here on the side. So let me just make a cut here, and the hoodie should just slip out with relative ease. Yay! This way I don't have to worry about attaching the arms later on. I'm gonna keep the belt and those ankle straps on the figure. I don't see a way to remove them easily. Now onto the eyes. The eyes aren't just painted on. They actually stick out a bit too. I can't just paint over them because you'll still be able to see the outlines. So let me sand it down and smooth them out as much as possible. Okay, I've been sanding for a very long time, and this is the best I can get it. It is not perfect, but I need to move on before I go crazy. I normally just freehand everything and improvise as I go. But because I'm going to be using black later, I need to know the placement first. So let me use a pencil to sketch out where I want to place the eyes. I don't want any black paint to get into these areas. Otherwise, it will be a pain to cover up later. In Across the Spiderverse, he got these giant triangular looking eyes, with these long hooks at the end. I believe this is how the eyes looked in the movie. Alright, let me do the same but for the shading and the black lines. I'm not confident enough to go in with a pen or black paint yet. The pencil feels much less intimidating to use. It's also much easier for me to just paint over the pencil marks too. And you know what? The pencil goes onto the plastic quite smoothly. So for the shading, I'm going to use this image as my main reference, and place the shading in the same areas. I'm also going to apply what I've learned from the X-Men 97 figures. My imaginary light source is going to be on the left side, so the shading is going to be a bit more intense on the right. Alright, I'm happy with the general placement. Let me now go over the pencil marks for the Micron pen. For those who watch my videos, you know I usually do this step last. But I've kinda realized that these pens don't do well on painted surfaces. The tips tend to pick up the paint and get clogged, so I want to try something different this time. I'll do the black pen first before I paint. And if retouching is required later on, I can do it with black paint instead. This way I don't wreck my pens, and this may also help with paint rub. We'll see. The only issue I see is that the Micron pens dry very slowly. I have to be very careful where I place my hands, otherwise I'm gonna smudge the ink. The Gundam pens may be a better choice here, but they are less forgiving. Alright, done. Now let me get rid of the plastic shine. I don't need to apply a thick layer, just enough to mattify it. And speaking of shine, the Micron pens also have this glossy finish, which I don't love. So I'm gonna go over the pen marks with the black paint. And now that I got the general placement down, I can also expand on it too. Oh, you know what? This isn't going exactly how I imagined. Is it me, or is it giving carnage? I thought the body is just red with black lines, but upon closer inspection, I see that there's actually this darker red color on the body. It's kinda like cell shading, but a bit more subtle. I should have done that first before I added the black paint. Ah, that looks much better. Having midtones definitely helped. I think I can add even more black to the arms and legs. But before I do that, let me put the vest back on. Okay, a little bit of the black paint got rubbed off. And I also realized that there should be some shading down the armpits. So let me work on it more off screen. Alright, I am done with the base body. I added more shading and those little black lines as well. I am pretty happy with how it looks. So I'm gonna move on to the ankle pouches. What do you call these? According to the reference image, the straps are just brown, like a light caramel brown, including those buckles. The belt itself appears to be the same color as well. So let me paint that brown too. As for the silver bits, I mixed myself a very light grey. In the reference image, they look white, but I actually think they're more of a light grey. It will also look more natural in my opinion. Done. Now I just gotta do the same to his gauntlets. Or those web shooters. Bam! I added some black outlines off camera. I had to do them off camera because I wanted to get them right the first time. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to remix the brown and the grey again. I'd rather not do that. But everything's going well so far. The 2D look is coming together very nicely. All there's left are the head and the vest. Let me do the eyes first. Although I already did the silhouette of the eyes with the black pen, I feel like the eyes are still too far apart. They should be a smidge closer together. So let me see if I can reshape them with the white paint. The rest of the eyes appear to be fine. It's just the inner side of the eyes. Okay, I like this more, but the edges are a little bit fuzzy, which is fine, because I still need to go over the pen marks with the black paint. So let me do that and clean up the edges. That looks much better. I also super glued the vest shut and glued the belt so that it's slanted at an angle. Last but not least, the vest. Let me first do a quick thin layer of light blue over the entire vest, including the drawstrings. I really like the spider logo that's already there, so let me do the same thing I did with Pav. Paint a thin layer first, and then scratch the paint off to reveal the spider logo, and continue to build up the blue until it's fully opaque. That way, I won't completely lose sight of the spider symbol, and use what's left of it as a stencil and paint over that with the black. And look at that! It looks like it's printed on, but it's actually hand painted. Let me seal everything before I do the final step. The last step is to add those black lines on this vest. The reason why I did a matte coat first is because I have no idea what I'm doing here. I have never done this before, so I kinda want a safety net. If I do mess up, I can wet my brush and hopefully wipe off any mistakes. But I'm gonna avoid doing that and just get the strokes right in one go. So wish me luck. Alright, here's the before and after. And would you look at that? It doesn't even look like the same figure anymore. I absolutely love how it turned out. Did I get the black lines right? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I am satisfied. It looks like it was done by a professional. The only issue I see is that you can still kinda see the outlines of the original eyes. It isn't super noticeable, so it doesn't bother me all that much, but it is there. The original figure isn't bad at all, but I can't deny that the painted one looks so much cooler and so much more appealing. Is this the best custom I've ever done? Did I nail the comic book look? Let me know down below. And please say yes, otherwise I'll never do comic book characters ever again. Okay, just kidding. I feel like I've learned quite a bit here. Is black still an intimidating color for me? Yes, but I feel like I know where to place some of the black lines now. If I have a good reference, that is. Overall, this figure was still a pain to paint. Like I said earlier, this one took me 2 weeks to do. And just like the other cel-shaded figures, I had to be very strategic about it. I had to go in a specific order to minimize the layers of paint and touch-ups. I also have to be extra careful not to rub the body parts against each other. The armpit areas where the vest meets the inner arms are prone to paint rubs if I'm not careful. Other than that, I don't find this figure too difficult to handle. I just had to be aware of the limitations. And despite all that, I feel like all these efforts were worth it. He looks straight out of a comic book. And the best part is, there doesn't seem to be a bad angle where the 2D illusion falls apart. Here are the Across the Spiderverse figures I've done recently. They look great together. Is it me, or is Scarlet Spider standing out a bit too much? He kinda looks like he was photoshopped into the group. But I guess that's how he looked in the movie too. So maybe it's a good thing? Oh, Boris the Marvel left this comment the other day, saying that I can use the blonde Peter's head on Scarlet Spider. That way, I can have an unmasked Ben Reilly too. Great idea. Except, the ball joint is too big for the head, and the head is a touch too small. Otherwise, it would have been cool. Alright, let's end this for the photo shoot. I'm so glad I did Scarlet Spider today. To be honest, Prowler Miles took a lot out of me already, but I knew that if I don't do something challenging in the beginning of the year, I'm not gonna do it later on. And now that I've done one, maybe I can do 1 or 2 more later this year. Which comic book character should I try next? You know what's interesting? This figure looks better in video than in photos. The 2D effect just looks so much more impressive in motion. Alright, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Give it a like and subscribe to see more content like this. I'm almost done with the Across the Spider-Verse wave. I still have Spider-Man 2099 and Spider-Punk to do. Hopefully they aren't as challenging. And until then, stay inspired and I'll see you soon. I can make it, so can you.